let's leave it a little bit short of that. But we have had talks at the highest level.
Trump referring to talks at the highest level with North Korea, which we have found out through the Washington Post, then confirmed by a Trump tweet, did happen between the CIA director and the evil dictator of North Korea. It's the highest level meeting between us and North Korea since 2000, when Madeleine Albright, as Secretary of State, met with the current idiot's dad.
Yeah, Kim Jong Un, right. All this in preparation for a planned summit, probably in June. Michael Auslin joins us. Michael is the William Griffiths Fellow in Contemporary Asia at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. His latest book is The End of the Asian Century, War, Stagnation, and the Risks of the World's Most Dynamic Region. Michael, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. May we call you Michael? Is that all right?
Yes, of course.
I hope so. Okay, good. You can call us Joe and Jack if you'd like.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm looking at your credentials and I'm thinking, Michael, how are you? It's a little casual. You're a learned man. At any rate, let's talk about North Korea. Were you surprised to hear that Pompeo had actually made contact with Kim Jong Un?
A little, but, look, if they're going to go down this road, I think they're doing it the right way, which is do these things behind the scenes, try to figure out how serious these guys are, which, at the end of the day, we're going to find out. They're going to find out, like every other president, that they're going to cheat and they're going to lie. But, if you're going to do it, don't do it so that you make yourself look like this overeager, sort of foolish, uninformed party that just will do anything to get them to the table. So doing this with Pompeo, he's a serious guy. He's a hardcore negotiator. Has military experience and congressional experience. I think that's the right way to do it. But at the end of the day, the real question is, when the rubber hits the road, what do we really think we're going to get out of this meeting? And you can't get the president in a room with this guy if there's any questions as to what the outcome is going to be.
Well, what would be the motivation for North Korea to, at this point, give up their nuclear weapons? That's just what I don't get.
Yeah, I don't think there's any motivation to give up the nuclear weapons. This is from one perspective. Look, we've seen this before. They will say they're ready for talks and they're ready to seriously begin negotiating. And like Lucy with the football, we just go right back to it and say, okay, this time you're really serious. But from the other perspective, there is at least an argument to be made that the Trump administration is, rattling the cages in a way that other administrations have not done. The sanctions have been more serious. I don't think they're yet serious enough. It's sort of surprising to me there's still stuff to sanction. We should have been sanctioning everything, 15, 20, 30 years ago. But in any case, there is the question of how worried are these guys really? Do they really think Trump's different? Do they really think that if they don't at least pretend to play ball, there could be some more pain coming in, and every time Trump launches an attack on Syria, for example, they're looking very carefully at that. So I think there's probably a bunch of different things going on, but they also may feel very confident, quite frankly. Look, they are at the doorstep now of having a nuclear capability and an ICBM capability, and they may feel that, this is now the time we can come to the Americans and get some good deal where we get them off the peninsula. We try to break their alliance with South Korea, and we'll promise down the road to get rid of nuclear weapons. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, and the truth of it is we will never really know what they're thinking, even when we're at the table with them.
Let's talk about pressure points for another minute. I've heard a couple of things posited. Number one, that China's sending the message, all right, that's enough. And secondly, that the Kim regime is actually running short of money, and every dictator needs to be able to bribe his followers. Do you buy the financial argument or the China argument?
More the financial, less the China. I think that you're right. What we understand, the information we're able to get, they're running out of money, but they've always been able to find ways to get money. They have a lot of illicit activities around the world: drug running, counterfeit money, counterfeit drugs. And the like, and whether they're really starving for money or not. Again, it's undoubtedly there's been some greater effect from the current sanctions, but they may just be at the point where they're thinking, look, we don't want to lose any more. As for China, again, it's an open question as to what Beijing is really saying to the North Koreans. Obviously, Kim went to his first foreign trip, went to China in March. And from every indication of that trip, the Chinese still have enormous influence over North Korea. On the other hand, from Beijing's perspective, they were getting a little nervous. They were nervous that Kim would be meeting with the South Korean President Moon. He might be meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister Abe, who's actually in the U.S. today meeting President Trump in Florida. And, of course, that he'd be meeting President Trump. So they were getting a little nervous that Kim was going to pull a hat trick of meeting the three adversarial leaders before he had even met Xi Jinping, the Chinese president. So I think it was partly China's deeply held intention to get Kim to Beijing no matter what, and probably to sweeten the pot somehow, because this is a very savvy dictator. It's a very savvy regime, and we shouldn't forget that. So the real question I think we should be asking is, what did China promise Kim? What type of aid did they promise him? Avoiding sanctions or giving money or turning a blind eye to the cross-border trade? There's a lot there that we should be more aware of, instead of thinking that, Beijing really wants to help, because the truth is they've never helped us on North Korea, and I don't think they're really willing to right now.
Michael Auslin is an expert on Asia at the Hoover Institution, Stanford.
My last question, and I guess we ask everybody this, is he a rational actor, this leader of North Korea, and is there any reason to fear him if he has nuclear weapons?
Well, I think we should definitely fear anyone who has nuclear weapons and is part of an aggressive, rogue regime that often acts unpredictably. That said, I think he's a rational actor. Now, that doesn't mean he's not a brutal actor. It doesn't mean that he is not someone who has, without any hesitation, eliminated family members and anyone around him who could be perceived as a threat, or someone who hasn't wholeheartedly pursued a nuclear program. But the reason we're still talking about North Korea and we're still trying to figure out how to deal with them is that it is a very rational regime. The regime wants to survive. It may or may not really still want to take over the peninsula. I think in its ultimate goals it does, but it has been very savvy, and that's why it didn't disappear decades ago. So you have to approach them when you're going to sit down at the table with them from that perspective. And I think Pompeo is someone who is very serious. John Bolton is very serious. These are not people who are going to be swayed by happy talk and good words and saying all we want is a photo op. So from that perspective, I think we should give the administration some running room and recognize that there are very serious, hardcore people there who are, I think, going to try to figure out the best way to approach this.
So obviously your expectations are less than sunshiny, but do you think even if nothing of great importance comes to this meeting, do you think it might be a positive step down the line of continued diplomacy?
I think that it's a mistake to go into a meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong Un unless you know exactly what is going to come out of that meeting. You don't want any surprises. You don't want anything that... That's
not really a Trumpian way to approach it, though. He's going to want to hash out a deal.
That's exactly right. And so I think the big danger that we face is that Trump, if I'm Kim, I'm going to dangle the grand bargain in front of him and say, look, we too can solve this right here at this table and get the Nobel Peace Prize and overturn 60 years of distrust and hatred and the like. And that's going to be a very tempting deal. The problem is, if we haven't thought through every twist and element of